Hello, whoever may listen to this. Um, I have a little something I'd like to talk about that I have entitled the age of Aquarius and Pisces. And before I get into it, I would like to say this. Really, right now, I would rather be playing Minecraft. Um, really, I would rather to live I guess what might be considered a normal life and to do kind of normal things and not be doing this. So um, I just wanted to say that I don't really want to have to be here to say this. Um, and if anybody doesn't particularly, that might run across this, that doesn't particularly want to see me or hear what I have to say, then I don't want to be here to say it any more than you want to have to look at me. I'll just say that. I would rather, just like I said, I'd rather be playing Plants vs. Zombies or something. I don't want to have to deal with all this stuff. I really don't. I don't have any desire to say any of this, to have to. I mean, it's interesting. I think it's interesting, but I don't have any desire to want to, I guess you might say, preach it. So, having said that, I don't really have a choice. I have tried several times to get out of having to say anything, but I guess it's like that old artesian well that, or artesian spring, I guess you'd call it, that William Branham talked about. It just bubbles up from inside of you, outside of it, and you can try to plug it up, but you can't. It comes up out of the ground. You know, an artesian spring, once it's the water's coming up out of the ground, you can try to plug it up, but you can't. You plug it up one place, it'll come out over there. So I've tried to plug myself off from things, and there's just no way to do it. So, but like I said, if anybody doesn't want to see me, well, I don't really want to see you either. So if anybody doesn't want to hear what I have to say, well, I don't even want to have to say it. So, you know, with that having been said, I would like to get into a little something. Or rather, I should say, I wouldn't like to get into a little something, but I'm going to have to, I guess. The artesian well springing up within me has decreed a few things, I guess I could say. And sorry, it's kind of hard to get started sometimes, but let's see. A good friend of mine told me I should write down notes the next time I do one of these to try to keep me on track. So I'm gonna try that. I wrote down a few notes here. But anyhow, what I would like to get into is a correlation of astrology and the age we live in, the ideologies that we deal with, and so anyway, I'll try my best to get right into it. Well, I don't know where to jump in exactly, but I would just like to say this. For some years, I have been trying to make this point, and dare I say, rightfully so, nobody would have, let's just say that the targeted audience, or the targeted demographic, as it was put, there's no way really that they should really get it. What I've been saying, it doesn't really make any sense that they would get it. So, especially given the fact the way I've been trying to bring it across, but I had no better way to try to do it. But I think today I've got something that's it's a little less deniable. It's a little less, you got to try harder to deny it or whatever. So it's not, let's say, fringe spiritual science quite so much anymore. I've got a little bit more proof this time. Anyhow, let's see. So, let's see, where should I begin? Okay, yeah. The idea that I was trying to say in times past was that we have entered into the age of Aquarius, obviously. So my idea was that given the fact that we've entered into the age of Aquarius, my idea, is that there are still certain things that you can determine about this age based on the fact of that it's still somewhat connected to all the other ages. So you can kind of use that as a diagram. You know, it's like if this is a wheel, imagine this is a wheel. You know, what, like this, whatever. Okay, imagine this is a wheel. Well, Aquarius is part of the hub of the wheel. So given the fact that it's part of the hub of the wheel, I mean, I don't see how anybody can deny that, but that's actually they can, and rightfully so. It's weird. It's Aquarius. It's weird. Okay, and I'm a part of Aquarius. A while back it was mentioned that, before I get into that, a while back it was mentioned something about, if you're Aquarius, then you're not going to be, I guess, I don't know if the right word would be ruled or told what to do or whatever, or controlled. And I'd just like to say this. There used to be an old adage that we used to say back in the Third Coming days that was, if anybody said something and it made sense, then everybody said, me too. So that's the way I feel about it too. I'm an Aquarian here, given the fact that I'm born within this, or live within this 2,000 year period age of Aquarius, or however many 2,000 some odd years. Okay, so that makes me an Aquarian. That makes me, my sun sign might not be Aquarius, but that makes me an Aquarian just as much as anybody else here. And that makes me ruled by, quote unquote, ruled, for lack of better words, use it as astrological term, ruled by this, by Aquarius. And I'd just like to say, me too. I'm not going to be ruled and controlled and told what to do at all either. So that's why I'm doing this. I'm going to do whatever I want to do, just like everybody else. So you can't rule and control me either. And this age, I guess it's going to be, just can't rule and control anybody. All of us. That's the point. So, but anyhow, so if anybody doesn't like what I got to say, then, well, whoop-de-doo. Whatever. That's the way I look at it. That's the way everybody else looks at it. So that's the way I'm going to look at it too. Me too. Me too. You can't rule me either. So anyhow, let's see. Okay. So my idea was that my previous idea, which I still kind of hold, I think I can do a better job of explaining it, is, and I might be hitting this from a different angle, but you can't rule and control me. You can't tell me what to do from my different angle either. It works for all of us. We're all Aquarians here in this 2,000 year cycle. So you can't rule me either. You can't, just because I'm hitting it from a different angle, just because I might not be hitting it from the mainstream angle, does not mean that I can't be ruled either. It's the same for me as it is for anybody else. So if I want to come at it from some what might consider some wild idea, then that's just the way it's going to be, because I'm not going to be ruled. But anyway, dare I say the Aquarius message, I'm going to start referring to it as the Aquarius message out here. If I come and say something from a totally wild point of view in their perspective, then they have only themselves to blame, because this whole age of Aquarius has caused that. so don't get mad at me. Anyhow, so the idea was that this hub, I thought, I thought this made pretty good sense. Maybe I didn't do a very good job of explaining it, but I thought I did. I'm pretty sure I did. To anybody that might have been listening, this whole hub here, it's all one unit essentially, the outer ring of this hub. Just imagine it's a wheel, and given that fact that there would be certain characteristics, given the fact that it's all a hub in the same unit, there would be certain base characteristics that would go from one age to another. Okay, that was my idea. Now, that was never really embraced, that I could tell, by the Aquarius message community, because, and I think the reason, and rightfully so, oddly enough, is that Aquarius is the age that nothing can be, there is no tie post, no way to tie it to anything, no way to compare it to anything. It's totally weird. It doesn't compare to anything. Okay, so, well, it makes sense that nobody would get it. Nobody would see what I was saying, that you could actually prove that, you know, because this is not an age of proving things. This is an age of just living, I guess. But anyway, so anyway, it stands to reason that nobody would really agree with the fact that I'm trying to make something fit when the whole message is don't make anything fit. You know, it's so I get it, but to me, so given that fact, I think I could never get any traction on what I was saying. Nobody was going to give me any traction upon what I said, because how can you? I'm trying to bring things that are trying to prove things in an age where nothing can be proven. So, so anyway, but I thought it made sense. I thought, well, if you've got this wheel, this hub here, then, even in Aquarius, it's an astrological age just like all the rest of them. There would be certain base elements that would be comparable from one to the other, okay? But no, that's a hard sell in an age where there are no base things to tie it together. I hope somebody understands what I'm trying to say. But now, I think I can prove it. I think I can prove it a little better, what I was trying to say, and here's why. I think it'll be a little harder for people to dismiss it this way. I'm not saying anybody will agree with me, but like I said, it's the artesian well. I got to say it anyway. I don't want to be here any more than you all want to listen to me. Okay, if you disagree with me. So anyhow, what we have is I got to thinking, and I thought, well, if I can't attempt to prove what things might be going on here, for better or for worse, in this age, by history, because history is my thing, obviously, then how can how could I attempt to prove it? Well, it's like this. The only way that I could think that anybody would perhaps listen to what I was saying is if you could go all the way back, because we're going retrograde, we're going this way, backwards in the zodiac. Come out of Pisces, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius. The only way I could think that anybody would listen to what I would have to say, or maybe understand, or whatever, is if you could go all the way back to Aquarius the last time that we were through it, which would be like, I guess 24,000 years ago, or 26,000 years ago, because every age is roughly about 2,000 years. So, but of course we don't have any written records of anything that long ago. We got like written histories like back to, Gemini barely, or something like that. So, or Taurus, past 6,000-7,000 years. So I can't prove it that way. I mean, if I had some written history of what we went through the last time that we did this astrological sign, then maybe I would have some sort of an idea. I could just say, hey, well, for better or for worse, this is what happened then, so we can assume that that's what's going to happen now. So it's like if you knew somebody's sun sign, then you can kind of tell what they're going to be like. If you go up to somebody and ask them, say, somebody you don't even know, and say, hey, what's your sun sign? And they look at you and say, oh, it's this or that. Well, you got some sort of an idea of what they're like. But in these terms, the only way I can compare it is comparing it to the baselines of other signs, or trying to compare it to perhaps people. And because we do that all the time, we use people. Anyway, I'm probably going too overboard on that. Let me get to the point. So, what I determined was, it occurred to me one day that since obviously I can't go back 24,000 years, then how could somebody begin to determine, because I've been saying a lot of things that were, either good or bad, but really just trying to state what I thought was going to be, what's going to be here, and what is here amongst us. And not really going good or bad, but really kind of good or bad at the same time. Anyhow, so the truth of this issue here is that I can't go back 24,000 years, but I don't have to. I think I got something that can give us an idea of what we're in for here. Let's say, what are we in for here in this age of Aquarius? And I need more board here, but I'm going to tell you what I think. Here's the deal. We just now went into the age of Aquarius. Like, I don't know how many years ago, not very many, 20, 40, 30, whatever. Nobody knows exactly the date, I guess. But anyway, but the world has been influenced by Aquarius for longer than that. And I'm sure, like, what do you mean? How do you mean that it's been influenced? It just went into Aquarius. How can it have been influenced longer than that? The reason is because there are cusps, okay? Cusps are 4 days in normal astrological terms, so 30 days, 30-day calendar year astrological sun signs. The cusps are 4 days in either direction. Roughly, that's what they say. So that means that the influence, if you were born on 4 days out from one sign to the other, then you're influenced by that sign. Okay, so say that you were born on, say the person was born on like May the 22nd. They would be a Gemini, but they would be influenced by Taurus. Okay, so just for an example, or however, you get the point. So the age of Aquarius has been influencing Pisces for a while. And given the fact that we can look back through history and see how that the cusp of Aquarius, the Pisces cusp Aquarius is what we've been through for the past, I'm going to say roughly 250 years. Because if you figure 4 days, the ratio of 4 days to 30, then to 2,000, what would that be? That would 2,000 years. That would be like I figure about 250 years. Okay, 200 years, something like that. And to prove my point, the planet Uranus, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. Okay, primarily. So the planet Uranus was discovered in, guess what year? 1781. Okay, now, if Aquarius started at roughly the year 2000, or probably, I don't know, 1990 or something might be a better date, but it doesn't really matter. Nobody knows exactly. Then that would mean that Uranus being discovered, I find it no coincidence that Uranus, the planet that rules Aquarius, was discovered, 219 years before 2000, the year 2000. So it was about, here, 1781. Okay, now, so that means that when Uranus was discovered, that means that I believe thoroughly that was the ushering in of the cusp of Aquarius in Pisces before Aquarius became Aquarius. So that would mean that for the past 219 years, roughly, that Aquarius has been affecting Pisces. Okay, so that means that we can look back the past 219 years and get an idea of what we're going to be in for and what we're in for now and how things are going, for better or for worse. So the history, I don't need to go back 24,000 years to get back to the original, well, I wouldn't call it the original Aquarius, but the last one perhaps. I can go back for the past 219 years and see the Aquarius affecting Pisces. Okay, now think about it. Think about it. Aquarius is supposed to be the highest intelligence, this rationale, humanism, humanitarianism, etc., etc. Okay, well, what's happened since the year 1871 when Uranus, the planet that rules Aquarius, what's happened since then? The Industrial Revolution, engines. What's the root word for engine? It's ingenious. Okay, these ingenious inventions have all been spurned by Aquarius, the cusp of Aquarius in Pisces. Because if I could do a whole big history lesson on this, but think, this was about the time of the Industrial Revolution. Uranus is the planet of revolution. Okay, the Uranus is revolution. Aquarius is revolution. Okay, so what all happened? What exactly happened in the year 1781, almost to the date? What happened was revolution of all types. Industrial revolution, political revolution, the greatest revolutions. What are the two greatest revolutions of all time, really? The two greatest revolutions of when I say all time, I mean the past rough history, you know. The two greatest revolutions that we have had are the Industrial Revolution and, politically, in my opinion, the greatest, really the most mind-blowing revolution that we have had in politics, in history, was the French Revolution. I know people might not be too up on the French Revolution, but I'll get into all that. So the French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution, almost to the year, happened in roughly 1780. That's about where it all started. Even the American Revolution, if we want to throw it in. But like I said, the French Revolution was the revolution. I mean, the American Revolution paled in comparison to what the French did. So I'm going to get into that. Now let's go back just a little bit more first. So the way I figured is, and I think I've seen this before, but each sign has roughly 30 days. Okay, then what happens is, I think I've seen this, I'm going to call it trimesters. I don't know what the real word for it is, but 10 days on either side. See, the 10 days in the middle of that 30 are just like pure that sign. Okay, so if you were born like right in the middle of Aries, you know, like April the 5th or something, then you would be a spot-on Aries. You're gonna exhibit the traits of Aries completely. Okay, but now if you were born over towards Taurus, you were born like April the like 13th or something. That's the 10 days towards Taurus, and you're going to have a little bit of maybe Taurus influence, and then you get on over towards, like, say, the 19th, when you're like 4 days out from the sign switching, then you're going to have a lot of Taurus influence, even though you're still going to be in Aries, okay? So it's like 3 trimesters, 3 10-day periods. Now, figure this. If you equate those 10-day periods into 2,000 years, you do that ratio again like I'm talking about, then the cusp was like 4 days. I figured that's about 200 years. Then the 10-day period is probably like about 600 or 700 years, something like that. Maybe 5, 6, 700 years. Okay, you split, what would be 600 years, 600 and some odd years, I guess, if you split 2,000 into 3 chunks. So let's go back. What happened roughly 500-600 years ago? Okay, this would have been over in Pisces. So this would have been the trimester of Aquarius, the Aquarius side of Pisces, beginning at about 1500. What happened there? What happened at about 1500? the Protestant Reformation. Okay, we didn't have a revolution, but we did have a Reformation. You see, I propose, I theorize, let's say here, that the very inkling and beginning of Uranus having some influence came all the way back in Martin Luther's day at the Protestant Reformation. Okay, it was a reformation against the church as it was at that time. So it was a religious reformation against a religious institution. Okay, that was the best they could muster, let's say, 500 or 600 years ago. That's the best they could do. Okay, because it had just started to come in. It was just starting to have a little bit of influence, man. Nobody even knew what it was yet. They didn't know the planet existed yet, apparently. So anyway, so I figure that's about it. Now, Pisces. The funny thing about Pisces is that the Dark Ages, the Dark Ages of were, the proverbial Dark Ages in Pisces, as far as I understand, started at about the year 550 or so. Okay, so the middle of Pisces is the Dark Ages. That's the most religiously controlled and dark ages. When I say the Dark Ages, I don't mean that in a bad way, because Pisces is a fine age just like anything else, and it was just doing what it does. For better or for worse. Let's just call it for better or for worse. So anyway, I mean, it's like, you think about it. The great cathedrals of Europe and all the different places around the world, but the great cathedrals of Europe were built, a lot of them around a year, I think it was about 1200 or 1300. Okay, these are great monuments to the ingenuity of man. It was religious monuments. Okay, they are great. If I've never been to Europe to see them, but I've looked at a lot of this stuff, this architecture and stuff, and these were great things. So to say that Pisces wasn't doing great things, Pisces was doing great things. But anyway, so even in the quote-unquote Dark Ages, they were doing great things. Okay, so, but anyway, you all get the point. You see what I'm getting at here. So the Dark Ages of Pisces, that was Pisces in the second trimester. The main chunk, the main meat of Pisces, all Pisces was at Dark Ages, because that's what Pisces represents. Okay, that's when they were steeped in law and purgatory and all those things. Okay, which was, oh boy, and I know this is going to cause some controversy, but like I said, I don't want to be here to say it any more than maybe you all want to be here to listen to it. But those were not bad things. Those were not bad things at all. Those were actually that stuff is kind of like legendary history, just as good as any of the rest of it. The medieval Dark Ages, that was great time of mysticism and all these stories like King Arthur and all this, a lot of this good stuff come out of that. A lot of the stuff that we would watch on TV today about myths and legends and stories and stuff that come out of Pisces. So this was good stuff. Okay, I grew up playing video games on all this stuff, like with knights and magic, and loved all that stuff growing up. So we had like card games and stuff, or board games or whatever. Loved that stuff. Okay, that's where it came from. Well, that was a great enjoyment in my life that come right out of the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages. Okay, so anyway, moving on. So now I want to get over into Aquarius and talk about a few issues that we have here. Like I said, we had the Industrial Revolution. That's why for the past couple hundred years, see, really the question, one thing I always thought of was, we're talking about in the increase in knowledge, the explosion of increase of knowledge and intellect over the past couple hundred years, and I would always think it'd be like, Well, now, what does Pisces have to do with an explosion of knowledge? Why was there an explosion of knowledge in Pisces? And now I have the answer, I believe, was that it was the cusp of Aquarius. Aquarius was bringing on the technological increase, the cusp in Pisces. Okay, and I'm not saying that Pisces did its own thing. Now Aquarius is doing its thing. It's been doing its thing for a while. So, for better, for worse. So, all of them. But that's what they do because, I'm not saying that Pisces is not intelligent. Oh, and another thing is this. You get into Leonardo da Vinci. Da Vinci, back in the 1500s, was drawing all kinds of these crazy inventions like air machines, a tank. He was like 400 years ahead of anybody. Come up with an actual tank for war. I don't know what all. All kinds of just whatever, physics of man, all kinds of stuff. That was the Renaissance. The Renaissance thinkers was probably spurned. That all came about after 1500, and was probably spurned by Uranus, and that's probably why they started thinking these things. So that's another thing to it. But anyhow. So, like I said, you had, this technological increase, and I figured, well, what did that have anything to do with Pisces? But for the past 200 some years, it's the Industrial Revolution, cars and everything you can think of, and whatever, TVs and everything, all this great invention. Not to mention Thomas Edison was an Aquarian, and Thomas Edison was the dude when it came to inventions. He's like the dude of all time when it comes to inventions, or one of them. I mean, him or Nikola Tesla, take your pick, I guess. But anyway, but that just goes to show, there he was right in the cusp of Aquarius and Pisces, there at about 1880 or 1900, somewhere around that area. Okay, so anyway, that explains the technological increase over the past couple hundred years. Now, the rest of it is that I would like to talk about what's happened here with us. I got a couple more things to talk about. What's happened with us in our having been influenced by Aquarius in the message. Because to me, I'm not even going to refer to it as the Love Divine anymore. I'm going to refer to it as the Message of Aquarius. I think that's a more fitting title. What we have is, we have kind of, I think, our own little thing. Well, let me say this first. Before I get into trying to determine things and trying to prove something one way or another in what seems to be an age where you can't prove anything. Let's say it might be doable, but it's a little harder of a sell in this climate to do that. But let me go back to this first. The French Revolution was a revolution in which I think what we've had here is we've had a parallel of the French Revolution in the message, and the one in the message come along afterwards, after what the political one did. Because if you think about it, really, William Branham's movement and what he did was, it was revolutionary, obviously. It was revolutionary to the church world. So it's kind of like, I don't know, I kind of almost think of it like the Renaissance of the church world. And so anyway, and then it kind of ended up culminating. The Renaissance got people to thinking about humanism and different things. And then that kind of culminated in a couple hundred years later in the French Revolution. That was kind of like the epitome of it. So anyhow, what happened in the French Revolution? Like I said, the French Revolution, I don't know the year exactly, but it was right about 1781, somewhere in that neighborhood, that the French Revolution happened almost the same exact year that Uranus was discovered, which rules Aquarius and is the planet of revolution. Okay, like I said, Industrial Revolution, French Revolution. Okay, now, we as Americans, if anybody overseas is listening to this, then, well, I'm going to talk about the American Revolution a little bit, but we as Americans, we think, oh man, we had some heck of a revolution here, buddy. We throwed out the king, and so we're going to do it our way, and what else did we do? We said everybody can come over regardless of whatever religion you are. You can come over and you can practice your religion and freedom of religion. Okay. And I know a lot of other peoples have had the kind of the same things go on. Freedom of religion, this and that, et cetera, et cetera. The same kinds of revolutions. So, the American Revolution is not, it's not just by itself in that regard. But anyway, so we think, oh boy, we really had a revolution here in America. Well, to those of you all who don't know much about the French Revolution, let me just say it like this. We didn't have no revolution. Those guys had a revolution. Okay. We didn't have nothing like what they had. What they did was they decided they were going to throw out the monarchy, for one. They, as I recall, beheaded the monarchs, which was Louis the 16th or 14th, I can't remember, and I believe it was Marie Antoinette. I think that they had both of them killed, the king and queen. And then, on top of that, they decided they were going to throw out religion entirely. I think pretty much the idea was, I think they pretty much threw out the Catholic Church entirely. I think they, threw out, it was just like throwing out religion entirely. They had, as I recall, they changed their calendars to where it wasn't a 7-day week anymore. It was a 10-day week based on math. I think, and the idea was that you got like the last 3 days of the week off was like the weekend or something. Don't quote me, I don't know, but I know it was like everything was set up within like rationalism and math, and anything to do with anything that had anything to do with religion, whether it made sense or not, was gone. Okay, that's the short. Don't forget that for later, because just because things were religious didn't mean that they didn't make a little bit of sense. Okay, we found out in retrospect that the 10-day week, however rational that might have been, however mathematical that might have been, has not stood the test of time. Obviously, 200 or 300 years later, we don't have a 10-day week. Okay, we don't have we don't have a calendar based on just dead science. It just don't work that way. Okay, that proved to be unreasonable. It was perhaps rational, but unreasonable. Okay, especially given the greater scope of the whole world. However well it might have worked in France, and in that situation, it just wasn't going to work. Okay, so anyway, so these guys go. I mean, they just blow it out of the water. Like I said, you think we had a revolution? These guys had a revolution. These French guys had a revolution. Okay, so anyway, what happened was and like I said, this was all brought on by Uranus. It was all brought on by Aquarius, the cusp of Aquarius in Pisces. Okay, so here we're in the age of religion, and then we have Aquarius influencing things in these two revolutions. So anyway, what proceeded to happen was they kick out the monarchs, they kick out the religious situation, the order, whatever you want to call it, the religions, monarchs, all gone, and everything was based on rationalism, humanism, etc., etc. So, and then what is the next thing that if you know the French Revolution, the next couple things that happened are a big part of it. In the process of all that, you all have heard of the guillotine. The guillotine was what they put your arms in, this board thing or whatever, and it had a big knife. That cut a man's head off, and you stuck the guy's head in there, and you pulled the string or whatever, and it cut his head off. Okay, well, that was a big part of the French Revolution. Was anybody who disagreed, anybody who was, certainly if they were a monarchist, or certainly if they were religious or whatever, they got their heads cut off. Okay, anybody, I I heard the story, I'm pretty sure in one of the documentaries I watched, where they were talking about how bad it got. Was that if I guess like if somebody didn't like their neighbor and they had a problem with their neighbor, then they would go and tell the authorities that were in charge of France at that time and say, hey, man, this guy was talking bad about the revolution. He was saying he wished we'd bring the monarchy and the Pope back or something, I don't know. And and so anyway, if that was the way to get rid of your neighbor, because they'd go get him and cut his head off. I'm pretty sure I heard that story. And he might not have. He might have been 100% for the revolution, so the French Revolution. But that was the way you got his head cut off. So that just told the tale of the extent of how ridiculous things had gotten. But it was like this. I imagine. Don't quote me on this. I don't know. I wasn't there. Perhaps I was in some past life. But anyway, I assume it was probably like this, and I base that somewhat off of the way that things are going now. But when the French Revolution happened, rationalism, humanism came in, everything. Then, and church out, monarchy out. Then if anybody was a monarchist or into religion, then they got their heads cut off. Okay, that's one group of people, heads cut off. Okay, secondly, anybody who perhaps maybe thought that, obviously recognized that there were some issues with the monarchy and with religion, but maybe were more on the reasonable end of things and didn't think that everybody should have their heads cut off. Maybe they were just maybe not totally rational, totally irrational into the whole science thing, but maybe just reasonable, men of reason that were probably somewhat in the middle. I imagine they got their heads cut off too, because anybody who did not agree with what it was, with the idea, then you got your head cut off, as far as I know. Okay, so if they didn't agree, even the people that weren't hardcore religious and hardcore monarchists, just people that were just everyday people that were just like, just let me live my life, by relative comparison, probably, and they were probably just as, for every time that the monarchy and the religious system made them like throw up their hands in disgust, I'm sure they probably threw up their hands in just as much disgust as to what was going on whenever all these humanists and rationalists and everybody got in power and decided to cut all their heads off. Okay, I'm sure they were just like throwing up their hands again. Okay, I'll give you an example. I'm sure everybody's heard of Napoleon. That was the second thing I want to talk about. Napoleon. The first thing was guillotining everybody. The second thing was Napoleon. Okay, when Napoleon came along, Napoleon started winning some battles as a French general, and then sooner or later he was like, deitized. He was like godlike in like it was really an odd combination in a humanist, rational society. But anyway, Napoleon got to be Emperor of France, which is like, you look at it and be like, what? How did, they just went from like having somebody in charge to cutting all their heads off, and now they went and made this guy emperor. I mean, it's like, you have to shake your head at it. And people were. I've seen stories of people that were shaking their heads at that. Couldn't, they were like people in other countries that were, had been watching the French Revolution and were probably, were like, hey, yeah, go guys to some degree, for what they were doing. Then they went and made Napoleon emperor, and they're like, what? So anyway, but anyhow, so they cut everybody's heads off. All the French that didn't agree with them, they cut all their heads off. Okay, French, by the way, means free, free men, Frenchmen, free. So anyway, so then Napoleon proceeds to terrorize the rest of Europe and try to bring them under control of the essentially the French Revolution. That their ideas, their humanist, rational ideas. Okay, so everybody in France who didn't agree, everybody who was rather monarchist or more like old school perhaps thinkers, or even people that were just like in between, that were just probably didn't even care too much about going to church, and it was like, well, I'll go if I feel like it. These people that they're like kind of in between, they got their heads cut off too. Everybody. So, and then Napoleon proceeds to torment everything. Okay, this was all brought on by Uranus. Okay, I'm going to explain what's going on here and what's been going on for a while now, based on history of Aquarius. Like I said, I can't go back 24,000 years, but I don't have to. I can go back 219. And I can tell you what's happened already, the history of Aquarius, because we've been in it for 200 years. We've been in this. It's been affecting Pisces. We can explain it based on how it affected Pisces, because this was not, Pisces would not have thrown out religion or monarchs. Well, perhaps monarchs if they got in the way of religion. I mean, Pisces was the age of religion, so I imagine they would have probably took the church over the monarchs, and kind of in a way that's what happened, because the church ended up ruling probably more than the monarchs did. I imagine in the age of Aries or something like that, the church, don't quote me on this, I'm no super historian here, but just going back to the age of Aries, when did a church ever rule a society or the world? In Pisces, the church essentially ruled the world. And ruled over the kings. Okay, in Aries, the kings pretty much ruled things. So Pisces was the age of church, for better or for worse. It's the age of church. Okay, it's the age of religion. It's the age of mysticism, and then Aquarius is the age of it's church. Pisces is kind of like the age of law and religion and mysticism, and because purgatory was kind of like at its height in Pisces, etc., etc. Hell, hell, purgatory, and then Aquarius, by contrast, is the sign of revolution and humanist thinking, humanitarian thinking, rational thinking. Rationale, I assume coincidentally, is a French word. Sounds like it would be anyway. So anyway, stands to reason. No pun intended, reason. But anyhow. So that all happened as a result of Uranus and Aquarius coming in. Now, I said all that to say this. I'm just telling it for better or for worse. Okay? Get mad at me if you all want to. Like I said, I don't want to be here no more than y'all want to listen to me, probably. But the artesian well is bubbling up within me, and I got to say it. Okay? For better or for worse, that's what happened. And I think pretty much most people agree that it was kind of a terrible thing, really, in a way. And I'm not saying it was entirely terrible, because I have never said that this thing was entirely terrible. I have been on board with a lot of the things, because like I said, I feel kind of like the Frenchman who he probably just looked at what the church did and what the monarchs did, and he threw up his hands. He probably got a newspaper, and he was sitting in a cafe in Paris and eating his whatever, and and he read his newspaper, and he was reading it, and he was like, my gosh, what is the church going to do next week? What are the monarchs going to do next week? And then they throw them all out, and then they proceed to cut off everybody's heads. It was like, a terrible response. So anyway, then this same guy sitting down there, and he's reading like, well, this guy got his head cut off, and they cut 100 people's heads off. They cut 1,000 people's heads off. It's a mass beheading, and he threw up his hands at that. And then he was like, he was in the middle, and I'm sure he was in danger of having his head cut off too if he didn't have his head cut off, because he was throwing up his hands at what they were doing. He probably did have his head cut off. I tend to think he did. Based on what I've been through, I think it's true, and what some others have been through. But anyway, but regardless, whether you were in the middle or you were a like more towards the end of religion and monarchist or whatever, everybody got their heads cut off, or they were in danger of getting their heads cut off. They didn't. So I'm going to bring this up to today. Like I said, y'all get mad at me if you want. This is the way it's going to be. I'm just going to tell it because it needs to be told, and everybody, and there's a lot of people out here that know it's true. What we have experienced here, like I said, the Renaissance, I figure the Renaissance was probably like the great Renaissance age by comparison was William Branham. Because it was a Renaissance, it was where people began to think outside of the religious thought patterns. And that's what it was during the age of Pisces. Okay? They began to reason and ration, whatever. So I figure that's kind of like the Renaissance. And then what we've had in the past, say, 50, 70 years is kind of like a microcosm of getting up to the French Revolution. Because what we've had here in the past probably 10 years after the days of the Third Coming is we have had a revolution, an Aquarian spurned revolution that has been most certainly and undoubtedly comparable to the French Revolution, which was also spurned by Uranus and Aquarius. For better or for worse, y'all can like me, get mad at me, hate me, whatever. That's facts as far as I can tell. Okay. Now, if anybody wants to come and say otherwise, I'm welcome to it. Come and tell me. Tell me why I'm wrong. Trust me, I don't prefer to be right about this as after what's transpired here. Okay, but anyway. So, what we have had is still good? We had the Renaissance thinkers, and that was a good thing in a way. Okay, and then we got up to the French Revolution, and the French Revolution went entirely overboard. It took the message. What we had was we had the Third Coming. We had something that was we had gotten up. It was good that we had Branham. We had the Third Coming. These were good things. Okay, and then it went and run a complete muck into this Aquarian message, because what we went into is an equivalent. What I call it is Branhamistic humanism. It's like it's the equivalent. Everything that was done in the French Revolution has been done here amongst us, because who's going to debate me on this? Where's it at? How are you going to? It's written right out. Everybody. I mean, it's in plain black and white writing. It's Branhamistic humanism. It's everything that the French Revolution is. Branhamistic rationale. It's Branhamistic version of, or Third Coming version, or whatever you want to call it, of getting rid of the church and the monarchs, and not only getting rid of them, but cutting their heads off completely. Okay. And like I said, I was kind of like the little French guy in between that was like throwing up his hands and looking at the stuff that the church and the monarchs and all that was doing. I was the guy that read the paper and was like, oh my goodness, what are they doing now? Okay, you all know I was there. I preached with you and said, look what they're doing. Okay, so you can't say that I'm in with that bunch, but there on the same hand, now what it's turned into is, and it's not like people don't know this. It's not like it's hidden under a rock. I mean, plenty of people have had their heads cut off to tell the tale. Now what it's turned into is that if anybody had any inkling, if anybody questioned what was going on based on a reason, questioned the rationale, it's quite rational. You can't say anything about this Aquarius message and say that it's not rational. It did have some, obviously we had problems with the church and with the monarchs in our Branhamistic circle here, in our Third Coming Branhamistic circle. We had some problems with the church, with the equivalent church and with the equivalent monarchs, we obviously had issues. I threw my hands up too. But now what we've got is we've got a total turn to rationale, to complete humanism, rational thinking, and science, and it's the equivalent of trying to make the week 10 days, and it's and in the process, which, like I said, I mean, obviously there was some kind of some good in that, because it's it's higher intelligence, but with that came that if you didn't agree with that, then if you didn't agree wholeheartedly with that, whether you were like pro-monarchy, pro-religious in Branham terms or Third Coming terms, or if you were like me, it was kind of like in between, and it's just like, what it is you got your head cut off. Okay, I've had my head cut off for years now. There are several others of us out here who've had our heads cut off. Okay, because we didn't just take the whole thing, because we were reasonable. This was rationale, but we were reasonable. That's exactly what's going on. We've had our heads cut off by this thing. It was just as much in the past 10 years that I threw up my hands about the things that the Message were doing and all that. I have, in the past 10 years, threw up my hands at this Aquarian message and been like, what are you guys doing? You've completely run a complete muck with this stuff, and it's not reasonable. They've cut everybody. They're dead. They have cut people's heads off that were there. Frenchmen. These were Frenchmen. These were our own countrymen, and they have cut their heads off, and it was totally unreasonable. Okay, I don't care how good your rationale is. I don't care how high your intelligence is of Aquarius. This is unreasonable. Okay, and it's been unreasonable for years. And y'all can get mad at me if you want, but that's the truth. And I was just a little guy in the middle. I was never a hardcore pro of the church system, or of the of the monarchical system by relative degree here. I mean, I've got my other ideas on monarchy that apply in different ways, but that's not what I'm talking about here. This is totally different. Okay. So, I mean, if it were in a worldview, if I was doing because you can't take certain things and apply them in different ways. It works out different in different ways. When you're talking about the whole world, something might work out different than what you're talking about one country, or whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be the world and countries. I know I do all the time, but it could be like one house versus one city. I mean, whatever. It's one thing versus another, microcosm versus majorcosm. Okay, that's different. So I didn't want anybody to take that and think that was what I was inferring. But anyway, that's what's happened. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, Uranus. Uranus came in the Branhamistic Renaissance and caused the French Revolution to happen, which guillotined the free men's heads off. Okay, and then rationale proceeded to take over everything, and that's what's going on. And then Napoleon, the great emperor, that scared the whole world. It don't matter how good. The thing about Napoleon was it didn't matter how rational the French were. It didn't matter, because he was just trying to take over everything. There's no reason in it. It might be rational, but there's no reason in it, and that's why everybody came against it. And so anyway, but the next thing is this. I think I've made my point there. That's something I've been wanting to say for a long time. That's something that a lot of people out here know is true. And regardless of how they're positioned exactly in terms of things, but a lot of my fellow countrymen have had their heads cut off unrightfully. And so anyway, the next thing I would like to say is this. The truth is, although I've been saying this whole time that we're in the age of Aquarius, that's technically true and technically not true. I titled this The Age of Aquarius and Pisces. And it's like this. We're really not in the age of Aquarius. I know people are going to be like, what? You know, we are in the age of Aquarius because the age of Aquarius is switched over like 20, 30 years ago or however long, you know. So we're in the age of Aquarius, okay? I'm not totally crazy here. Y'all might think I'm some crazy, but I'm not totally crazy. You know, whatever. Anyway, so, but the fact is that we're just like, see, the cusp of Aquarius in Pisces started, I figure, about 1781. Well, I got bad news for everybody, but the cusp of Pisces influencing Aquarius don't end until, if my math is anywhere near correct, 2250. Okay, so I got bad news for you guys. You got probably about 200 more years of Aquarius, of Pisces affecting Aquarius. Okay. Furthermore, we're right on the middle of it right now. We ain't probably 50 years out from Aquarius switching over. So what that would mean is, I proposed this question to two people. I said, two people that know astrology very well. And I asked them, I asked them both the same question. I said, if a person was born on February 20th, then what's their sign? And, you know, unless you're really, really good at astrology, then February 20th is right on the cusp. Okay, so, you know, I didn't look it up. I don't even know which one it is technically. But one answer I got was, well, they didn't say, you know, well, they're an Aquarian or they're a Pisces. They said they're a cusp. They didn't say that they were, you know, that would be that's a highly reasonable response to that question. They're a cusp. They didn't say, well, they're an Aquarian or a Pisces. They said they're a cusp. And then the second response I got was like, I don't know, Aquarius? Okay, so if you think about it, that's where we're at right now. There's two good answers to that question is, I don't know, Aquarius? It's not it's not a totally sure thing, just exactly how much Aquarius we are. But we are Aquarius. I assume probably February 20th is probably Aquarius. So, but I'm not sure. And then the other one was, well, it's cusp. Okay. Well, in 2020, I say, or 2022, or whatever year we're in now, I say that this is a cusp. I'm not going to call this Aquarius, although I am going to call it Aquarius. It's a cusp between Aquarius and Pisces. Okay, so that means that we're right on the cusp. So that means that we're not going to be terribly much more affected by Aquarius at this point than we are Pisces, the age that we just come out of. And really, the way I think of it is Aquarius got one over on Pisces with the French Revolution because they went in and just ripped religion to shreds. Okay, and you know, in a most unreasonable way, but you know, it's to be done. It's to be done that way. So, but they went in and ripped religion to shreds. So the way I got it figured is Aquarius has got one coming. Pisces is going to get them back. And before it's all said and done, I think that Pisces is going to have one last hoorah. And in my opinion, what that hoorah is I kind of think of it like this. Anything to do with the law and hell and all these Piscean institutions and religion at all have been so demonized that it's hard to get out. What's happened is it kind of reminds me of an old West town, an old Cowboy Day town in the American Old West, like the cowboy movies. I like westerns. So what it was Pisces represents religion and the law and hell and all this and that. So I kind of think of Pisces as kind of like the lawman. Pisces is the law dog, and Aquarius is kind of like the untamed West in a way, you might say, the cowboy kinda. I mean, I don't want to lump all cowboys into the same boat, but the cowboys kind of were lawless and come into town and shoot up the town and get drunk and make off with the prostitutes and the whole bit of it. Okay, and then sometimes they would even try to take the town over. And that's when the marshals had to come in, and the marshals had to take care of business and to clean the town up, because these people had went too far. So if you ask me, I think that there's a last hurrah of Pisces that will be kind of like the cowboy days, that is going to come in to this situation here that has developed and is in this situation that has developed here, of Aquarius getting a little too rowdy in the town and going to come in and say, hey, you know what, we're going to have some law and order. To some extent anyway, because we know that lawlessness, because Aquarius cannot be tamed, cannot be, like I was saying earlier, being a part of it. I know, I am myself an Aquarian because I'm born into this age, so I understand. I know myself the untamable nature and spirit of Aquarius, but that's not always for better or for worse. Let's say that's for better or for worse. And I think that in some reasonable degree, it would be a fine thing for, I'm all for the free market, and I'm all for freedom and the great Western pioneering spirit. But there, on the same hand, we need some law. And I know that might offend some people, but hey, if I haven't offended you already, then I guess keep listening. So anyway, but I kind of feel like that Pisces has got one last hurrah, because Pisces is still affecting this thing. And this town has gotten a little too rowdy, in my opinion. It needs to be brought back with some law. It needs to be, maybe not the old way of doing it, but the law needs to come back to town to some degree, let's say. And the marshal needs to come in and take control of the situation here, because it's just got too completely rowdy. And I think that's a reasonable assumption. And I don't know if any of you all have ever seen the movie Tombstone, but I think it was made in 1991. Probably, I consider it to be the best Western ever made. And that's saying a lot, given the fact of the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns. For you, those of you who watch westerns, the idea that one would beat Clint Eastwood and John Wayne, that says a lot. But I think it did. But in the movie Tombstone, there was these guys called the Cowboys, and they wore red sashes, and they had pretty much taken control of everything, to where everybody was scared to death to do anything or say anything. And that's what I feel like it's gotten to now, is that people, the Aquarian message has gotten so rational that they have pretty much scared everybody to say anything, just like in the French Revolution. And I think what they had recognized in that movie was that it had gotten so lawless and people were scared of it, that they didn't want to be the law. They didn't want to have to be the law. They went there. The idea was that those lawmen, Wyatt Earp, went to Tombstone to get away from being the law. Okay, but they went there and ended up having to be the law again. And that's what I feel is going on here, is that me personally, if I've got anything to do or say with this, I don't want to have to be the law. I came here to get away from the law. Okay, I was, kind of like the peace officer in Kansas. Okay, I wanted to get away from the law. That's the whole reason for coming here, into this town, going into the West, into Tombstone, Arizona. That's the point, is to get away from the law, because I've done my duty, okay, as Pisces law. But then they went there and seen the situation of how it got completely out of hand, and that's what I feel like this Aquarius message is, that they had to be the law again. Didn't want to be the law, but they had to be the law. They couldn't do anything otherwise. Couldn't walk down the street and look the people in the eyes that were scared to do anything for the sake of, lawlessness or whatever. So anyway, so I would just like to say that to anybody that's watched that movie, there was a scene in that movie to where when Wyatt Earp, I know a lot of people ain't gonna know this stuff, but for those of you that might listen to it, the Cowboys, whenever the lawmen, the lawmen took up arms again and took up the badges again, then the Cowboys had it out with them and killed one of their brothers and shot one of their brothers' arms off, and so anyway, they left out of town, and the guy looked at him and said, Wyatt Earp looked at him, and because Wyatt Earp was the main guy, or one of them, and he said, well, it's over, and they said, well, bye, and looked at the Cowboys, and then the next scene was, I guess they thought they were just going to run them out of town, and the next scene was that, they told the Cowboys guy, said, go finish them off, and they were getting on the train, and it was an ambush that they ambushed the Cowboys instead, and they had become official marshals at that point. And so Wyatt Earp told him, he said, when they thought it was over, Wyatt Earp told him that he killed one of the Cowboys, and he told the other one, he said, you tell him I'm coming. He said, you tell him the law's coming. He said, you tell him the law's coming, you tell him I'm coming, and hell's coming with me. And that's the way I think it's going to be here. It's about time that the marshals come back to town, clean this thing up, and you tell them that the law's coming, you tell them tell them that the marshal's coming, and tell them that hell's coming with him. And that's the way I figured. Pisces was law and hell, and we tried to get away from that, and it's still here. It's still got to be, the lawman's still got a little bit of a purpose here to clean this wild place up. So the law and hell is coming. Pisces is coming. The law is coming to clean this place up, and that's what I think is going on here. And so anyway, it's been fun. It's been real. It's been fun. How's that go? It's been real. It's been real, and it's been fun, but it ain't been real fun. So, so it's been real, it's been fun, but it ain't been real fun. So, sayonara.